Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Thank you for tuning into Haldanes Law Matters, a podcast where we have conversations about legal developments in Hong Kong. This podcast is brought to you by Haldanes, a Hong Kong-based law firm experienced in serving the needs of clients, both in Hong Kong and throughout the Asia Pacific. Established in 1975, the lawyers of Haldanes have an extensive collective knowledge of legal practice in the region. The firm has a strong reputation across all of its practice areas, and its excellence has been acknowledged by various awards bodies.
I have Patricia Liu, lawyer at Haldanes, joining me in this episode today. Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Hello. Hi, Steve.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Patricia, before we start, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Yeah, sure. I'm Patricia Liu, and I've joined Haldanes since 2011. At the time, I was a trainee. And after that, I was admitted as an associate with Haldanes. And since then, I've been practicing matrimonial law until now. And I'm lucky enough to be able to work together with my colleagues all these years. And earlier this year, I was promoted as a partner.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
So you're over a decade veteran then, should we say, in the matrimonial law space, right?
Yes.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to talking to you in this episode today. This is a topic that's actually close to my heart. In this episode, it's about divorce and how it affects children. When people get divorced, people often think about the husband and wife. But what are the considerations for the courts when deciding on the custody of children?
Well, first of all, let me explain what custody means. Custody actually comprises a bunch of rights that parents have in relation to the children. This includes the right to care and control, which I'll explain later what is care and control, and the right to make all the important decisions affecting the children, such as schooling, medical treatment, and religion. When the court is asked to decide on the custody of the children's best interest is always the first and paramount consideration to be taken into account by the court. There's also a checklist that the court will take into account when making a decision on custody. They are such as the age, sex of the children, physical and emotional needs of the children, their background, how capable of the parents are, and the relationship between the children and each parent. And also, because custody is basically stated in the ordinance. However, there are actually two other issues that will be dealt with by the court from time to time in proceedings in which the children are involved. And there are two issues. They are care and control and access. So care and control means that the power to make decisions in terms of the day-to-day care of a child by a parent. So in practice, care and control will lie on the parent who basically lives with the children on a daily basis. And access is given to the parent who does not have care and control, and it gives that parent right to basically visit the children regularly, whether it is within a defined time frame or it can be a flexible access arrangement.
How you explained it sounds so, I don't know, it sounds really easy. But we're talking about humans here, obviously. There must be so many different grey areas in how what you just described for the courts. How difficult is it to navigate all of that when it's actually happening in real life?
Yeah, it is very difficult because family and which involve children can be very emotional, and you just have to be very patient with your clients and give them guidance and advice. And you always have to remind them that the children are the most important one of the most important members that we have to take care of because they are vulnerable, they are very young. And the court and the lawyers here are actually trying to help the family to resolve their differences and hopefully not in a very acrimonious way and try to resolve the disputes as soon as possible.
When you get divorces, it can be very emotional. And I guess sometimes children without their meaning to become some sort of collateral, doesn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes we have to remind the client that we want to achieve the best result for you. At the same time, we also want to preserve the working relationship between you and your spouse, despite the divorce and separation.
You talked about custody. What is the difference between joint custody and sole custody, and how do courts typically decide on this?
Joint custody means that both parents will be able to actually make major decisions for the children, such as schooling, which school they will attend, medical treatment, and religion. And for sole custody, in principle, it means the major decision-making power is ultimately vested in one parent in these areas, such as schooling, medical treatment, and religion. Nowadays, in most cases, an order for joint custody is appropriate and encouraged by the court because this aligns with the concept of ongoing parental responsibility and involvement, and also the co-parenting spirit. So in general, court tends to encourage joint custody. For sole custody, it really depends on the circumstances of the case. Sole custody may be appropriate in cases involving the threat of violence, when there's clearly a very, very serious lack of trust between the parents, and which actually makes a joint custody order quite impossible because this will actually make the children more vulnerable in this environment. But the communication, the very difficult or lack of communication between the parents should not be sufficient enough to actually ask the court to order a sole custody. So I can imagine there's another scenario where sole custody may be appropriate, where one of the children of the family actually has a very, very serious medical issues that actually require one parent to make a decision for the medical treatment ultimately. Then this case is maybe suitable for sole custody. Having a sole custody does not mean that that sole custodian parent can make decisions for the children unilaterally, because the non-custodian parent will still need to be consulted with the decisions made by the sole custodian. If the non-custodian parent does not agree with such decisions, such as the choice of school that the child would attend, then the non-custodian parent can still make an application to court for the determination of the choice of school.
Ah, right. So if you don't have sole custody, you will still get a say on how your child is brought up. Is that right?
Yes, you still need to be consulted, and if you don't agree, you can still make an application to court and explain to the court why you think that this decision is not in the best interest of the children.
And I guess that explains why courts are encouraging joint custody.
Yes, that's correct.
Hong Kong is a very international city, and there's a lot of occasions where maybe perhaps one party wants to remove the child from Hong Kong on a permanent basis. Is joint custody realistic? What happens when one party wants to take the child away from the city on a permanent basis?
Yeah, whether you have joint custody or sole custody, if you want to remove the child from Hong Kong permanently, because as we notice nowadays, many people would like to leave Hong Kong for another country for immigration. I have quite a number of cases on relocation recently. But anyway, if one party wants to remove the child from Hong Kong, that party will need to obtain an order for leave for the child to be permanently removed. It means you need the court's permission to do so. If both parents agree to permanently remove the child to that particular country, then both parents will simply have to apply to the court by consent for an order that the child be permanently removed. If there's no agreement between the party who wants to remove the child out of Hong Kong will have to take out an application to court for the court's permission to do so. And the process can take up to at least 9 to 12 months. And is a very expensive and emotionally draining process.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that being a positive experience for the children either.
No, it's not, and the children will be subject to tremendous pressure because they simply don't know where they're going, whether they stay in Hong Kong or go somewhere else.
Sounds like a tricky one, that, because I guess people do move and things need to be resolved, I guess. So I guess is a very tricky one for the parties.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. It can be a very difficult decision to be made by the court as well.
mm.
So very often the court will also order social welfare report and international welfare report to make recommendations to see whether whether it will be in the best interest of the child if he or she is removed out of Hong Kong to another country.
It's not just a difficult process for the parents, for the lawyers, but it's also a very difficult process for the courts to decide.
Yeah, relocation is a very tricky one, as I said. So normally the court will have to consider the following factors, and these factors are actually laid down in lots of case law. So the first consideration for the court to consider is whether the relocation application is genuine, or whether it is motivated by some selfish desire that one parent would like to exclude the other parent from a child's life. If the application is genuine, whether the court will then consider whether the relocation proposal is realistic, such as the schooling, living environment for the child in another jurisdiction, and the applicant's access proposals for the other parent who's being left behind in Hong Kong. And after that, the court will also look at the opposing parties' opposition. Why does he or she oppose this relocation? Whether his or her concern is genuine for the benefit of the child's welfare, or whether it is by other unknown motive. And the court will also need to consider the extent of detriment to the opposing parent and his or her relationship with the child if the relocation application was allowed. Because you can imagine that once a child is removed out of Hong Kong, if that opposing parent is being left behind in Hong Kong, he or she may have less time with the children. So how does that affect the relationship between the child and the opposing parent? And the court will also have to look at what will be the impact on the applicant parent if he or she is not allowed to remove the child out of Hong Kong. So he or she may have very strong family tie in another jurisdiction, and she or he just stay in Hong Kong and cannot have that connection or do not have enough support from her family tie after divorce. So, because the main carer emotional well-being will also have to be taken care of in the relocation application. So there are actually lots of factors for the court to consider.
We touched a lot on custody during this show, during this episode. When divorce happens, I guess that there is no real positive outcome for the children. So I guess the next best thing is how can parties minimize the negative impact on children during divorce process?
I would say that the parties should actually try the best to settle the disputes over the children's issues as soon as possible. When the parents separate or divorce, the children are often subject to lots of pressure, and they are caught with loyalty conflict because they love both their parents. In an ideal world, I think the parents at the beginning of the separation or divorce, they should try to make plans and tell the children together that they are ending the relationship, but reassure the children that they still love the children the same. And I think they should not fight with each other or badmouth each other in front of the children, because the children would not want to see their parents being criticized. There's another thing that sometimes it may be difficult for the parents to do. I would say that the parents should really try their best not to disclose any details relating to the court proceedings to their children, because if you say too much details about the court proceedings, and the children may actually think that they might be the source of their conflict, which actually make them feel even worse. And in order to minimize the conflict, sometimes parenting coordinator will also be appointed to assist the family to deal with the ongoing conflict, because you can imagine you can't just go to court from time to time on every single minor issue over a matter. So you will need a parenting coordinator who can actually try to deal with the ongoing conflict improve the communication between the parents and educate them how to co-parent, and probably come up with a co-parenting plan for the benefit of the children.
I mentioned at the start that this is a topic close to my heart, and the reason for that is because I was 9 years old when my parents got divorced, and I
Yeah.
think they pretty much did exactly the opposite of what you just said.
Yeah.
So everything you just said, how to minimize the negative impact. I think my parents back then, this is the 80s, did pretty much exactly the opposite of what you just suggested. So yes, it's definitely a negative impact, and that's speaking from experience. It is an emotional experience, I guess, when you're getting divorced. Would it be fair to say that it is important to keep the most important thing in mind, which is basically the children?
Yes, I would say so, because the children are vulnerable. They're helpless in the divorce. They don't know what's going on. They pretty much need the parents' guidance. I would say that it would be best for the children to continue to have a very loving relationship with the parents. And in order to do that, we need the parents to at least have a level of cooperation, level of understanding that although the relationship ends, the relationship between the parents and the children should continue, and they're still working partners for the rest of their lives for the benefit of the children. As you may know, because the parents' divorce can actually bring a very long-term and negative impact to the children. As a matrimonial lawyer, one of my duties is to ensure that the children's welfare is protected and to minimize the negative impact that they have because of the divorce.
Absolutely right. Thank you for that. And that is all the time we have for today. Patricia, thank you for being on the show and sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Very lovely to talk to you, Steve.
Oh, lovely talking to you too. Thank you, listeners, for listening, and I look forward to talking to you on our next episode.
请勿靠近車門，請不要靠近車門。Please stand back from the doors.
Thank you again for tuning in. And to find out more about Haldanes, please visit www.haldanes.com.